20 lashes. The words fell across the crowded square like stones. Nobody moved. Even the traders who had been shouting over baskets of peppers and cassava went silent. At the center of the square, a young woman knelt in the dust with her hands tied behind her back. Her name was Amara. She was 21 years old. Her dress was faded from too many washings. Her sandals were held together with strips of cloth. A thin layer of dust covered her feet, besided by soldiers. He was 52, broad-shouldered, silver beginning to show in his beard, and known throughout the Kingdom of Abeni as a ruler who rarely changed his mind once judgment had been spoken. "Your Majesty," Amara whispered, "I did not steal them." The king stared down at her. "The coins were found in your basket. Someone put them there." A few people in the crowd laughed nervously. Captain Bako, commander of the palace guard. Bako smiled. There was no man. There was. King Adewale lifted one hand. Enough. Amara fell silent. The king had spent 30 years listening to excuses from thieves, corrupt merchants, dishonest officials, and men who believed tears could purchase mercy. He had learned to distrust desperation, or so he thought. Amara lowered her head. "Yes, Your Majesty." The king stepped down from the platform. People moved aside. Adewale walked slowly toward Amara, as though the ground beneath him had become unfamiliar. "Where did you get that?" Amara looked down. "The necklace?" "Yes, my mother gave it to me." Adewale's face changed. "Your mother? She died when I was little." The king reached toward the pendant, but stopped before touching it. On its back was a tiny cut, 3 diagonal lines. Adewale knew those marks. He had carved them himself. His wife had disappeared the same night, and their newborn daughter had supposedly been thrown into the river. King Adewale looked at the poor girl kneeling before him. For the first time in years, fear entered his eyes. "Untie her." Captain Bako hesitated. "Your Majesty?" "I said untie her." The ropes fell from Amara's wrists. "Where do you live?" Adewale asked. "In Kitala." "With whom?" "My grandmother." "What is her name?" Amara rubbed her wrists. 22 years earlier, Adewale had not expected to become king. His younger brother Dio had been the beloved one. Dio laughed loudly, rode horses too fast, and remembered the names of servants' children. Adewale had been quieter, more disciplined, more suited to administration. Their father used to joke that Adewale knew how to rule a kingdom, but Dio knew how to make one love him. Then their father died. Adewale inherited the throne. Dio became his closest advisor. For 3 years, the brothers ruled together. Then everything changed. Dio married a woman named Liana. She was not royal. She was the daughter of a respected healer from the northern hills. Dio refused. "I am marrying a woman," he told them, "not a border treaty." Adewale had laughed. He approved the marriage himself. A year later, Liana became pregnant. But not everyone celebrated, because Adewale had no children. His wife, Queen Sade, had suffered 2 miscarriages. If the king remained childless, Dio's child could one day inherit the throne. Then, one stormy night, Prince Dio was found dead near the western gate. A knife had entered beneath his ribs. Adewale never fully believed it. For years he sent men searching. Nothing. Eventually even hope became painful. So he stopped. Now, 22 years later, a starving young woman had appeared in a market wearing Dio's pendant. King Adewale returned to the palace before sunset. He went directly to a private room behind the throne chamber. There, inside a locked wooden cabinet, he removed another bronze pendant. Lion, crescent moon, 3 marks, scratched across the back. He placed it beside the memory of the pendant he had seen. Adewale. Mama Zuri had once served Liana, not merely as a servant. She had been her mother's oldest friend. When Liana entered the palace, Zuri came with her, and after the night Dio died, Zuri vanished too. Adewale summoned the palace archivist. "Bring me every record from the week Prince Dio died." The archivist blinked. "Every record, every one." By midnight, documents covered the king's table. Guard rotations, kitchen accounts, stable logs, letters, council minutes, gate records. One page was missing, the Western Gate Register. "King." The old man hesitated. "Lord Cato." Adewale leaned back. Lord Cato, his chief minister, his closest political advisor, the man who had served beside him for 27 years, the man whose son, Malik, was currently first in line to the throne because Adewale had never had a surviving child. The king said nothing. That silence frightened the archivist more than anger would have. Meanwhile, Amara returned to Kitala. Kitala was not a village people visited unless they had a reason. It sat beyond the southern walls beside a muddy tributary of the great river. Fishermen lived there, laborers, widows. The old woman was nearly 70. Her back had bent with age, but her eyes remained sharp. When Amara entered, Zuri immediately saw the red marks around her wrists. "What happened?" Amara tried to smile. Nothing. Your nothing has rope marks. Amara sat down. They accused me of stealing royal coins. Zuri's face hardened. Who? Palace guards. And the king sentenced me. Zuri grabbed the edge of the table. She did. Who was she? You know who she was? No. I know the name you gave me. Liana. I know you said she died when I was a baby. I know nothing about my father. Zuri's shoulders trembled. Amara stepped closer. The king knew your name. That did it. Zuri sat down. For 22 years she had imagined this moment. In every version, she had known exactly what to say. Now no words came. Finally she whispered, "Lock the door." A truth I was too afraid to deliver. The next morning King Adewale sent 3 people to Kitala. Not soldiers, not Captain Bako. 3 elderly palace women he trusted. Their instructions were simple. Find Amara. Ask Mama Zuri to come willingly. But when they reached the house, the door was open. A chair had been overturned. A clay bowl lay broken. And Mama Zuri was gone. Amara was standing in the center of the room, terrified. They took her. Bako entered confidently. Bako left. The king immediately sent a servant to Bako's house. The servant returned an hour later. Captain Bako's wife had been visiting her sister for 3 days. The captain had been alone. Kato folded his hands. I controlled half the palace. You had just become king. Your brother had been murdered. We were preparing for war. Forgive me if one piece of paper escaped my attention. Adewale looked at him. Did you know Liana's servant Zuri is alive? This time Kato reacted. Barely. But Adewale saw it. A small tightening around the eyes. No. She raised a girl. How fortunate for her. A girl wearing Daio's pendant. Silence. Then Kato smiled. Ah. Kato leaned back. Then we investigate carefully. And if she is, and for— There it was. Not family, not miracle, not Daio's child survived. Succession. Adewale stood. Thank you, Kato. For what? For reminding me what matters to you. That night, the king received another surprise. An old stableman named Jabari asked to see him. Jabari had served the royal family since Adayo was a boy. He walked with 2 sticks now. When he entered, he refused a chair. I heard you are asking about Prince Daio. I heard you are asking about Prince Daio. I heard you are asking about Prince Daio. Then speak now. Jabari stared at the floor. The night the Prince Daio. When she left, unite. With the baby. Jabari nodded, rapped against Zuri's chest. Why did you say nothing? Because they had a written travel order bearing your seal. My seal? Yes. I issued no such order. I know that now. Who gave it to you? Jabari looked up. Lord Kato. The room seemed to become colder. He told me foreign assassins had entered the city. He said you had ordered the women moved for their protection. What happened after they left? Bako's father rode after them with 6 men. Adewale stared at him. Bako's father had commanded the royal guard at the time. And 2 days later, the stable boy who had helped saddle their horses disappeared. Jabari's eyes filled. He was my nephew. Adewale closed his eyes. Fear had built the silence around him, one frightened person at a time. When he opened them again, he asked, would you testify? Jabari swallowed. Yes, even against Lord Kato. I have spent 22 years wishing I had been brave for one night. I think I can manage one morning. The next break came from Amara. Adewale, if this reaches you, Daio is dead. Kato knows the child lives. He told me tonight that the kingdom cannot survive uncertainty over succession. He says your grief has made you weak, and that Daio's daughter will become a weapon in the hands of your enemies. Yet she stepped backward. You don't get to say that and expect me to understand it. I don't. You almost had me whipped yesterday. The words struck harder than accusation. Adewale lowered his head. Yes. You looked at my clothes and decided what kind of person I was. Yes. You called me a thief. Yes. Would you have stopped if you hadn't seen this necklace? Adewale looked at her. He could have lied. A king had 1,000 elegant ways to avoid shame. Instead he said, no. Amara's eyes filled with tears. If anything, it made the truth uglier. That afternoon, the men following Captain Bako reported that he had entered an abandoned warehouse beside the river. Adewale sent guards he personally trusted. They found Mama Zuri inside, alive, terrified, and furious. They also only a young woman holding the old woman who had raised her. Later, Zuri told the full story. The night Prince Daio died, Liana had received a warning. Lord Kato had arranged the murder. Not for a mother she remembered, for a mother she had finally been allowed to know. The king ordered Lord Kato arrested, but when soldiers reached his chambers, he was gone. So was Captain Bako, and so was Malik. By sunrise, word arrived that 300 soldiers at the northern barracks had declared loyalty to Malik. Lord Kato had made his move. A rebellion had begun. Kato sent a message to the palace. palace. It contained one sentence: a kingdom needs certainty, not an old king's guilt, and a market girl's necklace. Adewale read it before the council. Some advisors wanted Amara hidden, others wanted her sent out of the kingdom. When everyone turned, she entered. You have all spent 22 years hiding truth because you were afraid of what would happen if people knew it. She looked at Adewale. Maybe stop doing that. The king almost smiled. What do you suggest? Tell them. Tell whom? Everyone. The next morning, bells rang across the capital. The king ordered the palace gates opened. Thousands gathered in the great courtyard. Merchants, soldiers, farmers, fishermen, servants, nobles, people from Kitala stood beside wealthy families who normally would never share the same space. Adewale came out without his crown. Amara stood beside him. So did Zuri. Then King Adewale told the kingdom everything. He told them about Dio, about Liana, about the missing record, about Kato, about the forged travel order, about Amara. And then he told them something his advisors had begged him not to say. 2 days ago, the king announced, I looked at this young woman and saw poverty before I saw innocence. The courtyard became silent. I sentenced her to be whipped for a crime she did not commit. Amara looked at him. I stopped the punishment, only become strong. He merely becomes surrounded by people too frightened to tell him when he is wrong. The king looked toward the soldiers. Lord Cato believes this kingdom belongs to whichever man can manipulate succession most successfully. It does not. He looked at the crowd. It belongs to its people. Then Zuri testified. Then Jabari. Then the forged documents were displayed. By afternoon, soldiers were abandoning Cato. By evening, 2 northern commanders had arrested Captain Bako. Malik surrendered the following morning. Lord Cato was captured. 3 days later, while attempting to cross the border, disguised as a merchant, he was brought before the Great Hall. For the first time in decades, he did not look calm. For the first time in decades, he did not look calm. You mistook controlling everything for protecting it. I gave this kingdom stability. You murdered my brother. I prevented civil war. You hunted his wife. I protected succession. You kept his daughter in poverty. Cato's jaw tightened. You think the poor girl will rule better? Adewale looked toward Amara. She already understands something neither of us did. What? That power is easiest to abuse when you convince yourself you deserve it. The investigation found no evidence that he had known how his grandfather secured his position until the final days. He had joined the rebellion after being told that Adewale intended to execute his entire family. Amara visited him before judgment. He sat behind an iron door. So you're the princess, he said. I don't know what I am. You're the reason I'm not heir anymore. Amara considered that. No, your grandfather is. Malik looked at her for a long time. You could. Amara shook her head. That seems to be how all this started. People deciding that blood gave them the right to decide everything. Malik looked at her for a long time. Then he laughed quietly. You really did grow up in a market. Yes, maybe that's not the insult my grandfather thought it was. No, Amara said. It isn't. Months passed. Amara did not immediately move into the palace. She refused. Instead, she continued living with Zuri while visiting Adewale several times each week. The king did not ask her to call him uncle. He did not ask her to forgive him. He simply showed up. They're bowing to you. I know. Most people enjoy that. She looked at him. That sounds suspiciously like flattery. It probably is. She laughed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh around him. The king stopped walking. For half a second, he heard Dio. Not the same laugh, but something inside it. Something familiar enough to hurt. Amara noticed. What? Nothing. That's a lie. Adewale smiled. You sound like your father. She became quiet. Tell me about him. So they sat beneath a market awning for almost 2 hours. You sound like your father. She became quiet. Tell me about him. About how he had once sold his jeweled belt to pay a farmer's debt and then claimed he had lost it gambling because he thought generosity sounded embarrassing. Amara laughed until she cried. Then she cried until she could not laugh anymore. And Adewale sat beside her through both. A year later, the palace announced that Amara had formally been recognized as Princess Amara Dio. But she agreed on one condition. The old Western administrative building, once used to collect taxes from Kitala and the surrounding poor districts, would become a public school and legal aid house. When Adewale asked why that mattered so much, Amara touched the faint marks that had once been left around her wrists. Because somewhere tomorrow there will be another poor person everyone has already decided is guilty. The king approved it immediately. Mama Zuri moved into a small house beside the school. She refused the palace. The ceilings are too high, she complained. A person could lose a thought up there. Amara visited every morning. Years later, children would hear the story of how Princess Amara was discovered. Most versions became more dramatic. dramatic with every telling. Some said the pendant glowed in sunlight. Others said the king fainted. One version "The truth is simpler," she told the children. A frightened young woman was accused of something she didn't do. A powerful man judged her too quickly. Then he saw something that forced him to look again. A child once raised his hand. "Princess, was the necklace magic?" Amara smiled. "No." "Then why did it save you?" She thought for a moment. "It didn't." The children looked confused. "The necklace only made the king stop." She touched the bronze lion resting against her chest. "What saved us afterward was people finally telling truths they had been afraid to tell." Across the courtyard, an older king, Adewale, heard her. She touched the bronze lion resting against her chest. "What saved us afterward was people finally telling truths they had been afraid to tell." The pendant had revealed who she was. It had not made her worthy. She had been worthy when she was barefoot in the dust. She had been worthy when her dress was torn. She had been worthy before anyone knew royal blood ran through her veins. And that became the lesson Adewale carried for the rest of his reign. The poorest person standing before a throne does not become valuable when a king discovers who their family is. They were valuable before the king bothered to look. And sometimes the greatest failure of power is not cruelty. It is believing that appearance gives you enough information to judge another human being. If this story touched you, subscribe for more powerful African stories about courage, justice, family, and the secrets that can change a life forever. And tell us in the comments, if you were Amara, could you have forgiven the king?